Hope is a funny thing. When you're young, you think it's a wildfire. Bright, loud, and unstoppable. You think it can burn down the whole rotten world and let you start over. I see that fire in the eyes of the new recruits, the young ones who've only known the struggle. They ask me questions. They see me cleaning the same rifle week after week, and they wonder why. An old man's ritual. They ask what the point of it all is, the hiding, the running, the losing. They don't see the bigger picture. And I tell them, there is no bigger picture. There are only small ones. Thousands of them. Millions of them. Little stories of survival and loss. You want to know what we're doing here? I'll tell you. Let me tell you about a bad run we made for some good medicine. It was about 10 years ago, back when the fire still felt like it could burn forever. We were camped near the ruins of Salt Lake. Different camp, mostly different faces, but the problems were always the same. Sickness was sweeping through the community. Dysentery. We were out of the right antibiotics and our water purifiers were shot. People were dying. Good people. Children. I was the logistics man. My job wasn't to fight, not really. It was to plan. To look at a map of a dead world and find a flicker of life. And I found one, or so I thought. I stood before them in the command tent, the air thick with worry. I pointed to a red circle on a map of the city. The Westgate Tower, I told them. 20 years ago, when the city fell, Fedra set up a triage center there. Records show a full FEMA medical cache. Everything we need. Never moved. Of course, there were objections. A tough old firebrand named Hector was the first to speak up. He reminded us all that it was in the flood zone, that half the city was underwater. A tomb, he called it. He was right, but that was the only reason it hadn't been picked clean. I told them the plan. The lower levels were flooded, but the cache was on the 10th floor. We'd go in quiet, smart, a minimal footprint, in and out. Lena was our leader, the best I ever knew. Fearless, smart. She saw the world for what it was but never stopped fighting for what it could be. She was the fire. I was just the guy who made sure we had enough fuel. She looked at the map, then at me. "Who's the team?" she asked. I laid it out. Me for the route, you for the muscle, Hector and Maria for rear guard. And then I said the last name. And Ben. Ben was just a kid, 20 years old, eager, nervous, desperate to prove himself. I saw Hector shake his head, ready to argue that it was no milk run for a rookie. But Lena cut him off. "The kid's a good shot," she said, "and he's fast. He's ready." She looked at me, a silent question in her eyes. I trusted him, so she did too. "He's on the team," she declared. "We leave at dawn." That night, the camp was quiet with a heavy sort of dread. At dawn, the 5 of us were at the edge of what used to be a highway, now a wide, murky river loading 2 inflatable rafts. Lena went over to Ben, checking his gear, tightening the straps on his pack. She told him to keep his head on a swivel, to listen to us, no arguments. He just nodded, "Yes, ma'am," trying to sound tougher than he felt. I walked over and handed him a ration bar. "Eat up," I said. "It's a long day." He thanked me, called me sir. I told him, "It's just Elias, and you earned this spot, Ben. Just stay close." I gave his shoulder a pat. Seeing that mix of fear and excitement in his eyes, it made my heart ache. We pushed off into the water, into the ruins. The city was a graveyard of giants. Skyscrapers rose like tombstones from the brown water. The silence, it was the worst part. The water swallows sound. Out in the open, you can hear them from a mile away. The groans, the shrieks. But in those watery canyons, they could be right under you and you'd never know. Every ripple, every shadow plays tricks on you. Ben was on edge, his head whipping around at every splash. We passed a bus stop, its roof just above the water. There were 2 skeletons on it, locked in an embrace for 20 years. A silent testament. After a few hours, we saw one. A lone runner, thrashing in the water, trying to climb onto the roof of a submerged car. It hadn't seen us. Lena held up a fist. She didn't need words. We all stopped paddling. She drew her bow. her movements like water, silent and fluid. The arrow thwacked into the creature's skull, and it collapsed back into the water without a sound. "Keep your eyes open," she whispered. "Where there's one." We all knew what she meant. We were all thinking the same thing. It was too quiet, way too quiet. We paddled on, the tension a physical thing now, our destination looming ahead. The dark, imposing shape of the Westgate Tower. We found the entrance to the parking garage on the north side, a concrete ramp dipping down into black, stagnant water. We had to abandon the rafts. The air inside was cold, thick with the smell of decay. The beams of our flashlights cut through the gloom, revealing rusted-out cars like sleeping beasts. The spores were thick, hanging in the air like a fog. "Masks on," Lena ordered. "The moment you seal that mask, the world changes. You're cut off. The only sound is your own mechanical breathing. You rely on your eyes, and in the dark, your eyes will lie to you." We found the stairwell and began to climb. The walls told a story of the last stand fought here. Graffiti, faded posters, and a barricade of office furniture on one landing. Behind it, spent shells and old blood, and a message, scrawled in what looked like dried blood on the wall. "God help US. They don't stop." I saw Ben stare at it, his breathing quickening inside his mask. Lena grabbed his shoulder, her voice sharp even through the filter. "Hey," eyes forward. "We're not here to read the news." We kept climbing. As we passed the 5th floor, I stopped. I held up my hand, listening. "Did you hear that?" I asked. We all froze. Over the sound of our own breathing, we heard it. Faint at first, a single rhythmic sound. Click, almost gentle. Click, click, and there it was, that sound. The one that gets into your marrow. It wasn't a groan of hunger or a shriek of rage. It was the sound of something alien, something that was no longer human, listening to a world it couldn't see. It was coming from above. Lena gestured for us to keep moving, to see what we were walking into. We came out onto the 8th floor, an old open-plan office, covered in 2 decades of dust. The clicking was louder here. It seemed to come from the center of the building. We moved slow, weapons ready, towards a railing that overlooked a massive, multi-story atrium. Lena, Ben, and I crept to the edge. We looked down. I've seen nests before. A dozen, maybe 20 infected holed up in some dark place. But this was a congregation, a colony. The atrium floor, 5 stories below, was a living, breathing nightmare of fungus and bodies. Huge, pulsating cordyceps structures climbed the walls, and nested among them were the clickers. Dozens of them, at least 50, maybe more. Some stood dormant, others twitched, their heads clicking erratically as they scanned the empty space. The entire building was their hive. Ben gasped. "My God," he whispered, and then I saw it. On our same floor, on the complete other side of that chasm of death, was a set of double doors with a faded FEMA logo. The cache. Lena knew it immediately. "No way we can get across there without them hearing us," she whispered. The floor was littered with debris, but we didn't have a choice. I told them we had to go slow, one step at a time, no sounds. What followed was the longest walk of my life. Every step was a prayer. We watched our feet, avoiding glass, avoiding metal, avoiding anything that could make a sound. The constant, ambient clicking from below was a symphony from hell. We were halfway across. Ben was terrified. I could see the sweat beading on his mask. He was trying so hard. He took a step back to avoid a piece of rubble, and his heel came down on a small piece of concrete. The crunch was deafening in the silence. The small rock skittered over the edge. It seemed to hang in the air for an eternity before it clattered on the floor 5 stories below. For one single, terrible heartbeat, there was silence. Then, every clicker in the nest snapped its head up towards us. A synchronized shriek erupted from 50 throats at once. A wave of pure hatred that shook the building. "Run!" Lena screamed. All hell broke loose. They swarmed up the walls, the pillars, moving with an unholy speed. We sprinted for the cash doors. I heard Hector and Maria open fire behind us, the boom of the shotgun, the crack of the rifle. Their screams followed a moment later. They were gone. Lena, Ben, and I slammed through the cash doors, dropping a metal bar across the handles just as the horde crashed against the other side. The metal groaned and dented under their fury. We were trapped. Ben was on the floor, hyperventilating. "I'm sorry," he kept saying. "I'm so sorry. It was my fault." Lena grabbed him, her voice a lifeline in the chaos. "Get it together, Ben. Panicking gets you killed. We're alive. That's all that matters." She looked at me, her eyes wild. "Elias, find what we need. Now." I sprang into motion, smashing open crates. I found it all. Antibiotics, purifiers, for bags. "I've got it," I yelled. But the pounding on the door was relentless. Cracks were spiderwebbing from the frame. We needed another way out. There were no other doors. Only a large window with a sheer 10-story drop. And then I saw it. A ventilation shaft cover high on the wall. It was small, but it was our only chance. In that moment, there was no plan. There was no logic. There was only the mission. Get the medicine out. The main door began to buckle inwards. Lena shoved a duffel bag full of medicine at Ben. "You go first," she ordered. "Get this out of here. We'll be right behind you." He was frozen, but her command was absolute. "That is an order. Go." I was already climbing a heavy metal shelf, kicking at the vent cover. It was stuck fast. The main door burst open. 3 clickers stumbled in. Lena dropped them with precise headshots, but more were pouring in right behind them. The room was filling up. I finally kicked the vent cover loose. "It's open. Ben, go," I yelled. Terror finally gave him motion. He scrambled up the shelf and dove headfirst into the darkness of the vent. I turned to help Lena. She was being pushed back, overwhelmed. A clicker lunged at me, and I fired my last pistol round into its head. I was out. I drew my knife. Lena saw it then, the hopelessness of our position. She looked from the growing horde to the vent, and then she looked at me. And in her eyes, I saw her make the decision. She shoved me hard towards the shelf. "Get the medicine home, Elias," she yelled. I screamed her name. "Lena, no. That's an order too," she shouted back. "Make it count." Before I could argue, she pulled a flare from her belt and threw it into the far corner of the room. It erupted with a blinding, hissing red light. The clickers, drawn by the intense sound and light, immediately turned and swarmed towards it. It bought us seconds. "Gio!" she screamed. She turned, raised her rifle, and unloaded her entire magazine into the oncoming mass, a final, defiant war cry on her lips. I scrambled into the vent, my face a mask of anguish. The last thing I saw was Lena, my friend, the heart of our group, being engulfed by a wave of grasping hands and clicking jaws. The vent was pitch black, a tight, claustrophobic coffin. I crawled frantically, pushing the bag of supplies ahead of me. Lena's final scream echoed in my mind, over and over. I caught up to Ben, who had frozen again. I grabbed him, my voice a harsh whisper. "Keep moving. We have to keep moving." We crawled in grim silence until we saw a faint light. Another vent cover. We kicked it out and fell into a small, empty office on the other side of the building. We were out. We were alive. Ben curled into a ball on the floor and sobbed, clutching his bag of medicine. "She's gone," he cried. "It's my fault." I knelt beside him. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to blame him. But all I saw was a terrified kid whose innocence had just been murdered. "No," I told him. "It wasn't your fault. It was the world's fault. Lena, she made a choice. She believed this, and I pointed to the bags of medicine. Was worth it. We're going to prove her right. Now get up. We're not done yet. I don't remember much about getting out of the building, or the journey back across that dead water as the sun set. I just remember the silence in the raft, the weight of the 2 bags of medicine, the weight of the 3 ghosts I was carrying with me. I had failed them. I had brought back the prize, but I had lost the team. The weight of that barter felt unbearable. We arrived back at the camp after dark. When they saw only 2 of us return, the hope drained from their faces. The camp doctor, Anna, rushed to us. "The medicine?" she asked, her voice trembling. I couldn't speak. I just handed her my bag. Ben handed her his. She looked inside, and tears of relief streamed down her face. "Oh, thank God," she whispered. "Thank you." She rushed off to save the sick. The medicine I held, the reason for it all, saved dozens of lives that week. But all I could feel was the loss. Ben came to my side. "She'd be proud, Elias," he said. I could only nod, the grief too heavy for words. Ben, he stayed a Firefly. He became a good leader. He died 5 years ago, pulling 2 kids out of a Fedra crossfire. He made his sacrifice count, just like Lena. So when the young ones ask me what the point is, I tell them this story. I used to think our purpose was to win, to raise a flag over the capital and declare the war over. I was wrong. We do it for the quiet moments that follow the storm. We fight so others can have a world where they don't have to. We carry the scars so they don't have to get them. Hope isn't the wildfire that burns down the world. It's the single candle you light in the dark. It doesn't promise the sun will rise. It just gives you enough light to get through the night. That's the point, to get through the night, and to remember the ones who burned so brightly to give us that light. There's a peace that comes after you tell a story like that, a settling of dust. The ghosts don't vanish, not really. They never do, but they step back into the shadows for a while. They let you breathe. After I told the young ones, after I told Maya about Westgate, about Lena and Ben, something in the camp shifted. The questions stopped. In their place grew a quiet understanding, a resolve. They started looking at the walls of this place not as a cage, but as something to protect. They understood the cost of the candle flame. For a few months, we had a good season, a quiet season. The patrols were safe. The hunts were successful. We got through the night, night after night. And in that rhythm, you can almost forget that the world outside is still a monster, sleeping with one eye open. Almost. But the monster always wakes up. It happened on a Tuesday, the day our scouts do their long-range sweep. Maya was leading it. She's a natural. She has Lena's eyes, that same way of seeing everything. And she saw him. He was just standing there, at the edge of the ravine that marks our northern border. Not infected, not Fedra, just a man. Old, thin as a rail, dressed in rags that might have been a uniform a lifetime ago. He wasn't armed. He wasn't hiding. He was just waiting, as if he knew we'd find him. They brought him in, of course. Standard procedure. Tied his hands, sat him in the center of camp, and came to get me. I'm the one who talks to strangers. I'm good at reading the stories in people's scars. He wouldn't give a name, wouldn't say where he came from. He just kept repeating one phrase, his voice a dry rasp. "I'm looking for the Fireflies. I have a message." A dozen rifles were pointed at him. The camp was a hornet's nest of suspicion. A trap? A spy? We see so few friendly faces anymore. I knelt in front of him, looked him in the eye. They were pale, watery, but they held a frightening clarity. "Who is the message from?" I asked him. He didn't answer. Instead, he slowly, deliberately, nodded towards the worn leather satchel at his side. Maya, cautious, opened it. Inside, there wasn't a weapon. There wasn't food. There was just one thing, a data slate, an old military model, caked in dirt and what looked like dried fungus. and on its metal casing, crudely carved and faded with time, was a symbol, a star streaked with crimson, the sigil of the Knights of the Crimson Star. The chapter we'd found in that crystalline fortress so long ago. No, that wasn't it. My memories were crossing. This was something else. He saw the look on my face. No, he rasped. Not them. He was looking past me, at my tent, at the rifle resting on its rack. Lena's rifle. My blood ran cold. The symbol carved on Lena's rifle stock wasn't the official Firefly logo. It was the mark of her old squad, before the Boston QZ fell. A little thing they did for each other. Promise. I thought I was the only person left alive who knew it. This stranger, he wasn't looking at the rifle. He was looking at the carving. I took the satchel from Maya. I told everyone to stand down, to give us space. They hesitated, but they trusted me. The camp fell silent. It was just me and the stranger. Who are you? I asked again, my voice barely a whisper. He finally looked at me. My name is Marcus, he said. I was a soldier, Fedra, stationed at the Westgate Tower. The story he told, it wasn't for the whole camp. It was for me. He was one of the soldiers stationed there when the city fell. He and his squad were trapped on the lower floors when the horde of infected swarmed the building. They heard the battle, 10 floors up. They heard the gunfire. They heard a woman's final, defiant scream. They were trapped for weeks, starving, hiding, listening to the nest above them. He said the clicking never stopped, day and night. It drove most of his squad mad. But then one day they heard something else. A new sound, gunfire, my pistol, Lena's rifle, a different sound than their own weapons. They realized they weren't alone. They thought it was a rescue. They tried to get out to signal us, but they were too weak, too slow. They found the aftermath, the cache room, littered with our spent casings and the bodies of the clickers we'd killed. And in the chaos, they found something we'd left behind. It was a map I had drawn, a map of the city, marking a dozen potential secondary supply caches. It had been in Ben's pack. It must have fallen out in the vent or when he fell into that final office. Marcus and the 2 other survivors of his squad used that map. It became their Bible. It took them years, moving from one X to the next, surviving on the scraps the world had left behind. They believed it was left by angels. A miracle. The other 2 died along the way. Sickness. A bad fall. For the last 5 years, it had just been him. Alone. Following my ghost across the country. He said he saw the Firefly symbols we'd leave behind. He knew we were real. He felt he owed a debt. You saved me, he said, his voice cracking. That woman, her scream, it drew them all away. It bought you time. It bought me time. I've spent 20 years trying to find the people who gave me a chance to live. He was a ghost from the worst day of my life, walking right into my home. He wasn't a threat. He was a loose end, a living, breathing echo of my failure. Lena didn't die to save me. She didn't die to save the Fireflies. She died to save the medicine. She made a calculation, a hard, cold, tactical choice. Her sacrifice had a purpose. This man, he changed the math. He was looking at me with such gratitude, such hope. The very thing I told Maya was so dangerous. He had built a legend around us, around her, the warrior angel of Westgate. And what could I tell him? The truth? That she died because a scared kid made a mistake? That her sacrifice was a desperate, last-ditch gamble and not some noble plan? That we left him and his friends to die without a second thought because we didn't even know they existed? To tell him the truth would be to kill the angel that had kept him alive for 20 years. It would orphan him all over again. But to lie to accept his thanks felt like a betrayal, a theft of Lena's memory. It felt like I would be claiming a nobility in our actions that we didn't earn. We were just survivors, desperate and lucky. I stood up. I walked over to my tent and picked up the rifle. I brought it back and knelt in front of Marcus. I didn't say anything. I just held it out to him. He looked at it, then back at me, confused. Her name was Lena, I said. My voice was quiet, but clear. She was the best of us. I watched him as he reached out a trembling hand and touched the carved stock. He traced the lines of the symbol, the one he had seen from afar. Tears streamed down his face. He wasn't crying from sorrow. He was crying from relief. He had found his angel's tombstone. In that moment, I understood. The truth didn't matter. Not the whole ugly truth. The only truth that mattered was the one that got you through the night. He had his story. I had mine. They were different, but they both hinged on the same thing: Lena's choice. His story didn't dishonor her. It amplified her. Her sacrifice wasn't just for us, for the medicine. The echo of her fall had given this man a reason to live for 2 decades. It had purpose beyond anything I could have calculated on a map. I let him hold the rifle for a long time. Then I took it back. The message wasn't one of words. It was one of survival. A living testament delivered to our door. A reminder that the choices we make, the sacrifices, they ripple outwards in ways we can never predict. They don't just save the people in front of us. Sometimes, they save a ghost hiding in the basement, listening in the dark. That night, for the first time in 10 years, I didn't just clean Lena's rifle. I told it the story of Marcus. Felt right. The ghosts were quiet. They were listening. And I think they were at peace. Because the candle flame hadn't just gotten us through the night. Its light had, against all odds, reached across the darkness and shown someone else the way home.